We should have destroyed Carthage, every man, woman and child, many years ago.
Hi guys, this is James from CVG and I'm here today with Andy Kelly.
Hello.
Andy, you've been playing Rome 2 Total War.
Yes.
Which is a sequel to Rome.
Yes.
How does the main campaign work in this version?
Well, there's now a lot of factions you can play as in the campaign here. So you can play as, obviously, Rome with all its technical might. Or you can play as the barbarians, like the Gauls and the Brits. And so each one has its own little campaign, its own little part of the world map, and so there's a lot of potential here for interesting campaign action. And there's now 3 ways of winning: civilization style, so you can win like with a military victory; economic or cultural. So it is possible to win without just conquering everyone, which makes it a little bit more interesting in terms of how your campaign will play out. You don't always have to win just by having the toughest army, which is interesting, and a first for this series as well.
Alright, and we saw a bit of the world map there. It's massive. It's not just Rome anymore.
Yeah.
Now it's like, is it the whole world?
It's a big chunk of the world. It's not the whole world, but it does mean that you can you can sail across to Britain and as the Romans did. So it feels a lot more global. But for a lot of the time in your campaign, especially to begin with, you're going to be focused on your chunk of Italy or Britain or whatever, fighting civil wars as well as wars with other countries.
And speaking of sailing, boats are new this year. In this edition of the game. Yeah. How do they work? Are they exciting to play with?
Well, naval combat's been in it for a while now, but it's got a different feel this time. In Shogun 2, the ships were all these big sort of floating castles, basically big lumps of wood and metal, and it was quite it was very glacially paced. Here it's the ships are a lot faster, at least the sort of Mediterranean class ships, which are used by the Romans, and they're very agile. So you can do sort of land style maneuvers like flanking and stuff with ships now. But the most important thing is that now ship combat and land combat is now seamless. So you can land on the beach and your soldiers can come off and then they can fight on land seamlessly, which is a really great new feature. And it makes for some really interesting battles where, say you're fighting on like the Nile in Egypt, you could be fighting with ships on the river whilst infantry are fighting on the shore. So makes battles much more dynamic, and you can do like Saving Private Ryan style beach landings, which are made all the more exciting by this new cinematic camera, where you can dive into or just slightly above the head of one soldier in a unit, and watch the battle play out from their perspective. And there's you hear like the sound of the boots thundering, and you hear the general shouting, doing rousing speeches before the battle and stuff. It feels it's the most cinematic one yet, and it gives the battles and the infantry a bit more of a personality. So say you send in an army that's outnumbered, that will be reflected in the general speech. So you'll say, we may be outnumbered, but we can still win this. So there's it just feels more like a battle's happening as opposed to like thousands of little robots are just clashing on battlefields. So that's a really big improvement.
And once you get them off the ship, there's lots of sort of different types of terrain this time round. And is it right that that terrain is affected by line of sight? And things?
That's a new thing now. Line of sight. So if the enemy army is like behind the crest of a hill, they'll be hidden unless you send out like an infantry unit. Like light infantry units can see further than heavy ones, so you want to send out like a sort of scouting party, and they'll probably die, or you can use them as a distraction, but they will reveal the enemy on your maps. So line of sight really changes the dynamic of battles as well, especially with this. There's lots of new terrain and sort of walled cities that can you can basically makes ambushing and tactics like that, sneaky tactics, a lot more useful. Like you can hide in the tree line and get the jump on, charge like a group of enemies with your cavalry and make them flee. There's tons more depth and richness to it, even for a series that's already massively deep. It's getting even deeper. It's reaching the Earth's core.
And you're not just getting cavalry and soldiers. I saw you fighting elephants.
There's war elephants, there's camelback units, there's obviously loads of Roman siege weapons, ballista, catapults, and if you hit insert on the keyboard you can control the siege weapons manually from first person, so you can, you know, lob cannonballs at enemies, and the camera will follow your rock as it goes towards the troops, and you'll see them all scattering. You'll see holes appearing in ship hulls and panicked enemies jumping off the ship to the doom. And you know, so yeah, there's the technology of Rome makes for some really interesting battles, but also it makes it tougher if you're playing as like a tribe who's got, you know, iron swords and slings and catapults versus you know, siege towers and ballistas. Then it makes interesting battles, but obviously you can still win by outsmarting them or drawing them into traps, and so it's not, you know, it's not the you can still win even if you're less technologically advanced. And
it's not all about fighting on the battlefield like this. Once you've won, you go back to like the campaign map,
yeah,
and then you can move your soldiers around on that as well. And
yeah, the campaign map's kind of like Civilization. It's turn-based, and it's all about kind of fighting for control of provinces, and there's less micromanagement now. They've streamlined that, so you won't be, you know, constantly taxing individual settlements and stuff. It's a lot more, you can get a lot more done in a turn. And if you're struggling for men in the middle of a war, you can hire mercenaries, and there's so much depth in this game. It is insane. It's one of the most deep games, both on the battlefield and on the turn-based campaign map.
So as it is really deep, for new players or people who haven't quite delved that far into it before, is it relatively easy to get to grips with?
I would say not quite. It is, if you've never played a Total War game before, this will confuse you. There's a Prologue tutorial which is really well done. It's like a story-led introduction to the mechanics, but even once you've done that, there's still so much to learn, and the interface has got so many buttons on it, and you've got advisors popping up telling you about this and that, about diplomacy, about so it is a difficult game to get to grips with, even though they've made an attempt at making it more accessible. But it is still, you're gonna have to sit there and really pay attention for a good few hours. You know, it's not like a game where you can just sort of shut your brain off and enjoy it. You've really got to, you know, invest a lot of time in it and pay attention to it and learn all these, you know, ancient terms for units, and learn how diplomacy works and learn battle tactics. But when you do stick with it, it is really rewarding, and there are hundreds and hundreds of hours of game here.